Today's episode is brought to you by LaRosse Media. They make professional videos to fit any budget, so next time you need a commercial, promo, or corporate video, think LaRosse. Check them out at larossemedia.com. Hello and welcome to the Stinking Albatross Podcast. My name is Alyssa Globe, and I'm here once again with my partner in crime, Scott Hayward. How's it going, Scott?
Good, Alyssa. How are you?
I am doing well. It's been a little bit. It's been like at least 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah, it's just been over. We were going to record this last week, but you had some sort of allergic reaction or something like that. You texted me the night before, so we decided to bump this another week. So we are human beings. We are not robots, despite what a lot of people out there think. And so we get colds, we get sick, our kids get sick.
I think people think you're a robot more than me.
I know. I was trying to project onto you just to make myself feel better in my cold, robotic heart.
Mm-hmm. I know that you just got back from Ottawa. I know that you've been busy. Give us an update.
Yeah, well, since the last time we talked, I had my mom and my sister out for Thanksgiving to come visit us. It was the first time my mom actually got to come visit me living in Ontario, despite the fact that we are leaving right away. So for those that you can see behind me, there are no books no longer on the bookshelf. That's not because I am not a reader, despite what many out there might think. Actually, we've packed them up and they're downstairs in the garage ready to be moved out. So we've started packing up to make our big move out to Manitoba, because for right now I will be taking over and focusing on building up our database in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and northwestern Ontario. Saskatchewan, they got the provincial election next year. Manitoba, they just had the provincial election, so there'll be a leadership race for the Progressive Conservative Party. So it was a lot of fun to have my family out to join us. We did all kinds of things. We went to downtown Toronto. We went up on the CN Tower. Which actually, it's been a few years since I've been up there, and it's not necessarily inexpensive. But I will say it is worth the money, especially to go at least one time. So, showed my mom the falls, my sister as well. She had been there before. We went on the Hornblower, so that's the boat that goes right up against the falls. Went on with my 2-year-old daughter, who was fine for a little bit. I had her right at the front of the boat, and then when the water just came crashing down, we had to go inside the boat, and then she was fine after that. It was a lot of fun. My dad would have come out as well, except he had torn his meniscus and just had surgery a few days beforehand. So he had to stay home and just watch a bunch of hockey and football without anyone interrupting him. So that's probably the best Thanksgiving gift we could have given him. Not that people usually give gifts for Thanksgiving anyway, but he got one right there. And
he didn't get stabbed going to Toronto, so that's always a positive as
well.
Yeah,
exactly. We avoided the TTC, which is a deep, dark place that you should never go to, which is Toronto's subway system, because we want to live. So we didn't go there. But yeah, it's been busy nonetheless. Such a simple question, such a long answer. But how about you guys? How's it been out in Calgary?
Yeah, so last weekend I spoke at an event that True North put on. It was called True North Nation, and it was the first time they've ever put something like this on. It was in Calgary, and about 450 people came. It was a full-day event. MP Stephanie Kuzy spoke, and, the main characters of True North, Andrew Lawton, Harrison Faulkner, Candice Malcolm, and then Danielle Smith spoke at the very end there. I did a panel in the morning with Sheila Gunn-Reid and Lindsay Shepherd, and it went really well. It was really nice to kind of talk about conservatism in a more general point of view. So we talked about, kind of the hate we get from the left. And it was interesting, too, from a specifically pro-life point of view, because although we do get trolled to a certain extent, we also get a lot of vitriol. But sometimes I was talking about how that comes from a point of pain, which is kind of ties into one of the topics in our podcast. And yeah, it went really well, and it was well received. And then I had a table there and met a lot of new pro-lifers that I probably wouldn't have come across before. It was a really good event. I hope they do it all over the country. And I'm very supportive of independent media, especially True North. Love Andrew Lawton.
Yeah.
I miss him on the radio, but I'm glad he has a show. And don't miss Dingell Smith on the radio, but you still hear enough of her. So, but we do like Andrew was great on the radio because he was a social conservative, but was really well spoken on all different types of issues. And that's sort of lacking right now. You have sort of the libertarians, then you have the red Tories, but you don't really have anyone truly conservative.
Yeah, he really fits the bill on that, and he's well liked, not just within a specific part of the political spectrum, not
Hmm.
just amongst conservatives, but I know talking to reporters and journalists in legacy media, and they really respect him. They love interacting with him. They love being on panels with him, and I think that's a true testament to the type of person that he is.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of the day was sort of gruesome in a certain extent, but they did this trivia game and it was started out funny, like who was trolled by this tweet or whatever, and then they did a trivia game called did this excerpt come from Playboy or public school, because of how
Mm.
graphically sexual they were, and like half the room got most of them wrong because it was actually really hard to tell. And
That's
then Andrew
sad.
had to read them, which I think he was even more awkward doing. But yeah, it was a poignant game. Like it was sort of funny to a certain extent, but at the end of the day, like I think it'll hit the audience really hard that this was actually happening right underneath our noses in our own public school system. So hopefully it gave enough people the light under the fire to actually do something about it.
Yeah, and real quick, because I know that this isn't a topic, although it'll probably be a topic on the next podcast. So, in my hometown, the Brand School Division has two by-elections: one for a seat in Ward One, which includes the city of Brandon itself, and one for a seat in Ward Two, which is the surrounding area that's part of the Brand School Division. And you have pro-parental rights candidates, one running in each of the wards, so as to not to split the vote. And every like 2 weeks, because I think that's how often the Brand School Division Board of Trustees meets, the parents are not relenting. Like they keep coming and they keep talking about the issues and what they would like to see changed in the school division. And like, because you're talking about this game, right? Where they're revealing what's actually happening in public schools. And so when
Mhm.
I'm talking to these trustee candidates back home, the thing that I always like to push with them is, well, whenever you have literature out there to try to get people to come to your side, just expose it. Just,
Mhm.
if you have to kind of bleep out certain words, or what's the word I'm looking for? Like kind of pixelate an image from one of these books that you want to put in your campaign literature, that's fine. But like people, normal people, common sense people will be shocked by this. And that's the best thing you can have. You don't even have to say anything. Just show this is what the other candidates support. I don't support this. And if you also don't support this, vote for me. They basically do our jobs for us. But they just think that we're not going to touch it. We're not going to bring it up, or they can just keep sneaking it, like you said, underneath our noses. And the best disinfectant is sunlight. So I'm really,
Mhm.
I can understand how gruesome or grotesque that game might have been, but what a brilliant way to bring up the issue in an event like that.
Mhm. Yeah, so hopefully they do one in Ontario and other places because I
Invite
think it
Doug
was
Ford and
really
his cabinet to it.
yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, Doug Ford did appoint Andrew Lawton as a candidate back in whenever 2018, so I don't think that they're at odds per se. I could actually see him showing up, so that would be definitely be a good thing. Okay, so our first topic for this podcast isn't anything Canadian political, but it does have to do with the abortion issue, and it did go viral, and it's still sort of going viral the last week or so, and that's the fact that Britney Spears revealed in
Mm.
her new memoir that she got an abortion while dating Justin Timberlake. And I think that, as completely sad as this is, when you have a celebrity that big talk about the pain she
Hmm.
experienced and sort of the pressure and coercion she experienced with an abortion, that can change quite a lot of minds in a single sentence. And basically, what she said was when she was in her 20s, early 20s, she was dating Justin Timberlake. And she became pregnant. Maybe she was 19 and she became pregnant and had an abortion. They didn't want any medical team or doctors involved, so she actually took an abortion pill. And she said that she reeled around in pain for hours on the bathroom floor while she basically bled the baby out. Justin Timberlake, I was about to say Justin Trudeau, Timberlake pressured her, said he didn't want to be a father. She wanted to keep the baby. And she says she regrets it. It's one of the most painful experiences in her life. What's also interesting was that her own sister, Jamie Lynn Spears, had a similar situation where she became pregnant at 16, and she was also pressured by her professional team and her family to have an abortion, and she actually didn't. And because of that, she was barred from speaking to Britney Spears because of how big she was. And, Jamie Lynn was going through this very public teen pregnancy. But I think a lot of these things probably contributed to Britney Spears' current mental health situation that she's going through. I know that she's like the butt of a lot of jokes, but now that she's kind of revealed some of her personal hardships and past and pain, I don't think I could ever make fun of her or mock her in any way. Not that I was before, but especially now, given how difficult we know her life has been with this regard, and I'm sure with others. And it's just kind of brought to light the pain of abortion. And a lot of medical professionals don't want to talk about abortion regret, or they just downright say that it doesn't exist. But the more stories come out like that, the more that's disproven.
Yeah, I remember back in 2008 or whatever it was when she shaved her head, and everyone was taken back by that, myself included. Not that I really pay a ton of attention to pop culture, but I remember watching Mad TV, and they'd have like skits on it and everything. And it's a good reminder that oftentimes when celebrities or even just people in general have kind of these extreme reactions, it is a reaction. Like there's something deeper there. I was doing a little bit of research on the story, and I think it was an excerpt from her upcoming memoirs that was provided to various editors and publishers around the world. And I think this was reported in the BBC, that one of the experts from her memoirs was talking about how she was starting to get a little bit bigger and going on tours and things like that. And she took, I don't know, quite a year off, but something like that. And she went back home to small town Louisiana, where, she would just drive around town, go to school, went to prom, just lived a normal life. And she was talking about in this expert from her memoirs, like how important that was. And I think sometimes like a lot of people are maybe jealous of celebrities for the wrong reasons. I think it's a good reminder of just really appreciating kind of maybe the normal things, quote unquote, that we have in our lives, and just how solid and grounded that is, and really a gift. Maybe I'm still just in Thanksgiving mode, but to be thankful for things like that. So when I was doing research on this story, that really hit me. But also when I first read this story, you know what? The immediate thing I thought about, Alyssa, I thought about the two times that Dr. Leslyn Lewis ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada. And she had her abortion policy, which was a 4-point policy, which was to defund abortion overseas, to pass legislation to legally restrict sex-selective abortion, to fund and assist crisis pregnancy centers. And then the fourth part, which a lot of people didn't really talk about, I thought, enough, which was to criminalize coercion to abortion, to criminalize coercing a woman to choose abortion against her will, which was obviously, this was the case from her family, which is just crazy to think that a family could be like that, from Justin Timberlake, which, it is like Justin was also young at that time. So like I'm more concerned about her family than Justin, but still like not good. I don't know about these guys that have initials JT, but bad news, I guess, when it comes to the abortion issue. But that's what I immediately thought about, was like, wow, like if this can, like, she was a young woman at the time, obviously, like I think you said 19 or whatever she was. But like incredible stardom, like you can basically do whatever you want. And yet, despite having all that stardom and money and power, if you want to call it that, still was able to succumb to pressure like that. It's just really sad. And if it can happen to someone like Britney Spears, you can only imagine, for kind of that regular young woman, what kind of pressure would be there. So that's also something I thought of when I read this story.
Yeah, and just along the lines of the shaving the head, that there was sort of a timeline. So basically, she was 19. She had an abortion with Justin Timberlake. Then he broke up with her via a text message, and then shortly after, she married her backup
Did they have text
dancer, which
messages
was
back
also
then?
yes.
2002? Wow.
Yeah, her backup dancer Kevin Federline, and she was photographed shaving her head because Federline wouldn't let her see her two kids. So she had this sort of post-abortion trauma, and then she was prevented from seeing her two kids, I think, which just triggered her enough to break her to a certain extent. And then for that same year that she wasn't allowed to see her kids because of her mental health state, she was placed under a conservatorship, which was very public recently. And she was prohibited specifically from having more children. So she was forced to have an IUD device inserted against her wishes. So, like, this is all extremely traumatic, almost like borderline torture to a certain extent.
I don't
It
think it's
reminds me of
borderline.
like it reminds me of like forced sterilization
Yep.
that happened. So it's all very gruesome and disturbing. And yeah, I don't know much more to say about it, but I mean, there have been so many studies about post-abortion trauma. 64% of women who said they were pressured into abortion, like we were talking coercion, 65% showed trauma, including post-traumatic stress disorder. They're 65% higher risk at clinical depression, 6 times higher rate of suicide, 60% higher suicidal thoughts. Teen girls are 10 times more likely to attempt suicide if they have an abortion than adult women. And the list goes on. So this is no light matter. And I think it was the beginning of the end for Britney, because it all kind of, her mental health state really deteriorated after that.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that you see in some other countries when a woman requests to have an abortion is automatic offering of counseling, whether it be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. And like you were saying, Alyssa, I don't think that's something that's talked about enough in this country. It's just kind of swept under the rug. So, congratulations, Canada. There's a beacon of, women's rights where, well, I know this didn't happen in Canada, the United States, where someone like Britney Spears can be tortured. How that's legal to insert an IUD against someone's wishes, I'll never know. I don't think it is. I can't see that being constitutional. And then when women suffer from being post-abortive, there's no assistance to be there. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if you called your provincial government to say, like, hey, I had an abortion 10 years ago, and I'm going through this, and I think I'm ready to work through it. Can you hook me up with a psychiatrist or a psychologist? Where do I go to get help? That the first thing that they offer would probably be medical assistance in dying, assisted suicide. So that's the state of things that we're in Canada, for example. And I think this Britney Spears story brings a lot of that stuff to light, and hopefully it's talked about in the right way.
And as a side note, I actually met a woman at the True North Nation event on the weekend who said that she became more pro-life because of Leslyn and her story and her policies. So I thought that was really cool, and I want to tell Leslyn that, and I'm sure she's not the first and she won't be the last. But speaking of the influence of politicians, let's talk about Nahanni Fontaine. She is an MLA in Manitoba, where you are moving, where there is an NDP government currently. The election took place on October 3rd, and the NDP won a majority government, taking 34 seats out of 57. The PC government had been in power since 2016. And last week, the new cabinet was announced, and the MLA for St. John's, whose name is Nahanni Fontaine, was appointed the Minister of Families responsible for accessibility and gender equity. So for those who don't know about this woman, she has proposed 2 different types of abortion bubble zone bills. In 2018, she proposed to implement a bubble zone around abortion clinics and hospitals. And then in 2021, she tried again, but with an even more censorious version, Bill 207, which added a 50-meter censorship zone around every school in the province as well, so that pro-life activists couldn't go to schools or to help women going into the abortion clinic. And now they have a majority government, so there's no doubt that she will introduce and actually finally pass this bill. When Roe v. Wade was overturned, she wrote
Hmm.
an op-ed in the Winnipeg Press warning Manitobans about the PC caucus, saying that the majority were pro-life, that they speak at the March for Life, and that you know just because there is abortion legal abortion, there needs to be more expanded access. So these are the types of results that we get when there are Liberal and NDP governments across the country in different provinces. And we already have bubble zones in Alberta and in Ontario and elsewhere. So, Manitoba will just be another province where that will be the case. And it means that less women will be able to have abortion alternative information and counseling.
Yeah, no, it's really sad, and in addition to it, because this is an issue at the school board level in Manitoba, she's also an extremist when it comes to parental rights, in terms of being against parental rights when it comes to the education of their children in the public school system, and I know that's something that she's going to be focusing on in her new ministry. So, yeah, this is really unfortunate, but at the same time, you were mentioning bubble zone statutes, laws that exist in other provinces like Alberta and like Ontario. Guess what? There's UCP and progressive conservative majorities in both Alberta and Ontario, respectively. There have been in both provinces for a number of years now. And what do we still have there? We still have bubble zone laws. So,
Hmm.
I think that oftentimes, and I wrote a blog post about this. Uh, in regards specifically to the most recent provincial election in Alberta back in May, that if conservative, and I really use air quotes here, conservative governments aren't going to actually implement a conservative agenda, particularly not necessarily implement a conservative agenda, but root out at least a Marxist agenda within the public school systems, then don't be surprised when the NDP, for example, win a majority government in Manitoba, or, for example, in Alberta, you kept your UCP majority government by 1,668 votes over
Hmm.
5 ridings in Calgary. There are more NDP MLAs in Calgary. The NDP, for the first time ever in history, got more votes than the UCP or the predecessor Conservative parties, being the Wild Rose and the Progressive Conservative Party in Calgary. And that's just going to continue, whether the UCP is in government or not, because you actually have to implement somewhat, at least, of a conservative agenda that's more than just trying to balance the budget. So, in Manitoba, if they do introduce and pass this legislation, then it is incumbent upon the next progressive conservative government of Manitoba to make sure that they repeal that legislation. Because Manitoba, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but Manitoba is one of, if not the only province that actually passed conscientious ejection legislation for physicians and healthcare professionals, specifically when it comes to the issue of assisted suicide. They've had that passed for a number of years, 7, 8 years, something like that. So I would not be surprised if the new NDP government that exists there repeals that legislation. I don't understand why, whenever we as social conservatives want to bring up an issue within these federal, provincial conservative parties and say, hey, when we're in government, we want to repeal this terrible law that affects the things that we, value and our principles, for when we're in government. And then, those other conservatives within these conservative party coalitions say, well, that's already law. It's already passed. There's nothing we can do about it. That's BS, because whenever we pass laws like the conscientious ejection legislation they have in Manitoba, why is it that the NDP, when they come in power, they get to repeal that law and then
Hmm.
pass something crazy? Well, like, why can't we do that? So, sorry, I'm on a rant now because it has me very upset. But this is another reason why, moving back home, to focus on making sure that we try to increase our database so that we can get a good new leader of the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba, so that when they contest the next election and hopefully win the next election, that they actually are going to implement a conservative agenda, which means repealing legislation like the bubble zone legislation that I'm sure that the new NDP government would be more than happy to introduce under Nahanni Fontaine. One thing, though, is that Nahanni Fontaine is a minister of the Crown. So she's not going to get private member. She's not get the opportunity to introduce private members legislation. So as a cabinet minister, oftentimes, it's much easier to introduce legislation. But I doubt that the cabinet as a whole is necessarily going to want her to introduce legislation that does not specifically pertain to her portfolio. Now she can make an argument being, the minister responsible for gender equity, and perhaps that's why they created this ministry for her specifically so she can introduce that legislation. But we'll have to see. And I'm interested to see what kind of response there's going to be from the progressive conservatives, as well as the liberals, because the liberals only have one MLA left, and that's Sydney Lamoureux, who is the daughter of Kevin Lamoureux, who's a long-term liberal member of parliament for Winnipeg North. And before Justin Trudeau became leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, Kevin Lamoureux was a pro-life liberal MP. So given that Cindy's probably going to be, I think she is the interim leader. And if the Liberal Party of Manitoba is smart, they'd probably make her the leader because she is a very capable young woman. I wonder if she's going to steer that party in a bit of a more open, like actually, as per the definition, liberal position for the Liberal Party of Manitoba and not be so extreme on the abortion issue. But it is going to be interesting because there has to be some sort of pushback. And then once you actually win power, you actually have to do something with the power, or else what's the whole point of doing anything at all?
Yeah, I mean, when Danielle Smith spoke this past weekend, she did mention that Alberta is not a place where we commit assisted suicide on those who have mental illness. But to me, that just isn't enough. Like,
You can
people
say
did
that.
clap for that.
You can say that, but that you don't have, unless you pass legislation, which would probably be ultra virus, but unless you pass some sort of legislation, you can say that all you want, but it's not going to change anything.
Well, I actually think they will pass legislation because
I
not
hope
only
so.
did she say that publicly, but then the current cabinet minister for, mental health is Dan Williams, who's like one of the strongest pro-life MLAs here in Alberta. So I do believe that will be something that they will do. But I mean, I don't think that's enough because the whole day was talked. There were so many different issues talked about in each of the speeches, social issues, and she only touched upon one very lightly. And so, yeah, maybe that will sway some people. Well, this is better than the Liberals, but it's not going to entice a lot of conservatives to actually get up and vote, and that's what we need because, it just suppresses the vote as long as there's no strong policies. So. Yeah, I think electing strong leadership is part one, and then part two is also filling the caucus full of positive peer pressure and pro-life politicians so they can actually pressure the leader as well.
Nature communicates with us in a universal language. The sunrise starts a new day. The sunset marks our accomplishments.
The most beautiful communication is where the speaker and the listener match perfectly and understand the same message.
Your future audience is waiting to hear from you. What message do you need to share?
At LaRosse Media, we fashion beautiful communications through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Create your own most beautiful message. Visit larosmedia.com and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Speaking of assisted suicide, there was recently a story that was written by our friend Amanda Ackman, who works for the diocese here in Calgary. And it piqued our attention because there was an 81-year-old woman in Calgary who actually got her very first tattoo. That was only part of the story. The tattoo actually says, "Don't euthanize me," because she finds that it's necessary given the state of hospital and healthcare in Canada. And her story is actually quite interesting. She was born in England. She came to Canada in 1957, and she adopted 7 children and was actually in an abusive relationship. And she did take a lot of pills to try and kill herself at one point.
Mm.
She thought of her children, got the help that she needs, survived that suicide attempt. And so she knows better than most, the effect of mental health, the effect of depression, of suicidal thoughts, and of actually trying to commit suicide. So the fact that she's now having, years and years later, decades later, to actually get a tattoo to tell those who are supposed to be caring for her not to kill her, I think speaks very loudly. And whenever she goes to hospital, she says that the nurses always see her tattoo and tell her, "Good for you." And there's a good 4-minute video you can watch about Bill C-314, the EdFast bill we've talked about in past episodes. And I think you should go check it out. Her name is Christine Nagel. And this was, again, a video done by Amanda Ackman at the Calgary Diocese.
Yeah, I know it's great work by Amanda. And it's a sad story. That this is happening. I do believe, and I know I've said this in previous episodes of our podcast, I do believe that we're getting to a point in this country where the liberties, shall we say, taken when it comes to assisted suicide in this country since it was legalized and passed by Parliament in 2016. I think that there's a lot of pushback to it, and I wouldn't be surprised if there is an increasing number, which I know from the Angus Reid poll that they had a month or two ago on this issue. There's an increasing amount of Canadians that are saying, you know what, like, yeah, maybe 10 years ago I was in favor of assisted suicide for those that have terminal cancer that were going to die in 3 months anyway. I think an increasing amount of those people are probably, yeah, you know what, this has just been way too slippery of a slope, and let's help that person that has that terminal cancer that's going to be painful for the next 3 months. Let's help them for those 3 months, but it's not worth allowing someone to commit suicide in that specific instance, because it's just opened up this can of worms that's just getting darker and more pervasive across this country. Also, with our healthcare system, there's those in our podcast that are going to be in favor of a completely publicly funded healthcare system. There's those that are going to want some sort of mix, and those that don't want it at all. Regardless of where you come down on that debate, our healthcare system's not in a good place. It hasn't been for a long time. We're not the only country in the world that has that. Even those with other systems have that. But it gets kind of scary how utilitarian things have gotten, and how you have some people in the healthcare system, whether they be physicians or nurses or otherwise, that it's just like a conveyor belt, and get them in, get them out. And if they get out living, or they get out in a body bag because we administered assisted suicide to them, who cares? Like, we just don't have the beds. I think you get a lot to that point too. Also, it's a little bit of an angering moment to kind of think about, and an angering specific little thing, the fact that our healthcare system has such an extreme strain, yet so many provinces for so long had all these dumb vaccine mandates for all these physicians and nurses that couldn't actually help people.
Oh my gosh, there's so many problems with healthcare, and honestly, I don't understand. I really don't. I'll have to look at more of the arguments, but I don't understand people who don't agree with having a little bit of both. Because, I do understand the argument, oh, well, the rich get to go first. But then, if people actually want to pay for it, then they'll free up so many spots that, they're currently taking up, so that people who can afford it can actually go faster, can get their appointments faster. And I currently have a relative who has cancer, and, they found just by themselves 3 tumors. It took them like weeks to get in to see a doctor, and then to get even just a PET scan to actually confirm the diagnosis and the stage and all that. It took another month. Like, you could be dead in a month. Yeah. Like, given the, so, Aaron, my husband and I were talking like, okay, well, we would absolutely put out whatever, $1,000 or whatever it would cost for a PET scan, because that is literally the difference between life and death. So it's very frustrating. I know they're very frustrated. We're frustrated on our end. Like, we just can't do anything. Even when their doctor finally realized how aggressive it was, they tried to get the PET scan moved up, but there just weren't any spots. There were no available spots. So It's very disheartening and it's scary because yeah, it's happening to a relative now, but what if it happens to one of our kids or our husbands or even ourselves? Like it's a scary thought, and I would certainly appreciate the opportunity to shell out some money to save a life. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I personally come into that opinion of myself that I don't mind a publicly funded system. Like everyone has their basic provincial healthcare insurance plans covering them. And then those who want to buy additional insurance for other things, they can go ahead and do it. And I don't understand why only provincially ran hospitals and facilities are the only ones that can deliver healthcare. I don't know why private institutions can't exist that would also build the provincial crown. So whether it be, personally, I would love to see this because I'd feel a lot safer. And I think a lot of people who are not Catholic would also feel a lot safer with it. But if you had orders of nuns, like the Grey Nuns running hospitals again, I feel like I could go in there without a "Don't kill me" tattoo on my arm. I think Christine probably, I don't know if she's Catholic or not, but would probably feel a lot more comfortable with that. It's one of my favorite policies from Pierre Poilievre, and I think he had this during his leadership race run, which is, one of the ways to address a healthcare crisis in this country is to increase supply. In this country, we have something like 20 or 30,000 people who actually were able to get their license as a physician in another country. Canada only recognizes licenses for physicians in like 7 other countries. I don't even think like maybe the United Kingdom is part of the United States for sure, but like places like Australia, Ireland, Poland, none of them are like France, places like that. I think France is not recognized. Anyway, so he wants to change that so that you just write a quick exam, like a reciprocity exam is what we call it amongst the other professions in this country, and then you can get your license. Although when he was challenged in that famous apple eating video about it, his answer was kind of dumb, which is like, oh, well, we'll just get rid of the gatekeepers. Like, okay, that's not really a plan. I would love to hear him say like, oh, like all the colleges of physicians and surgeons that don't want to go along with this, I'm going to take away their charitable tax status because they raise a lot of money from other physicians that are part of the college who give money to them so they can actually run the college. I would just get rid of that or take away or pressure promise to take away the charters. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. I would like a little more meat to the bones when he talks and actually answers questions as opposed to just sitting there and eating an apple. But it's a scary situation, and it creates an environment where a lot of people who just don't naturally, which is kind of crazy that they're in healthcare, but just don't naturally value the dignity of human life like a lot of pro-lifers would then so easily and so quickly go to a quote-unquote solution like assisted suicide to free up the system.
Yeah, I would love doctors from Poland, pro-life Poland, currently pro-life Poland, to come here. Like they've been taught their whole lives that they're pro-life, and that's how they were taught in medical school and stuff. And it would be great to have more doctors like that, where it wasn't like an inherent automatic abortion mind when a woman in a crisis pregnancy comes to them. So yeah, that I definitely would support something like that.
We live in a world that grows through communication.
Every connection comes from a dream to be heard and realized.
To welcome a better future. What are your dreams?
LaRosse Media will help communicate your vision through our professional video production services and marketing strategies.
Start building connections to your future audience. Visit larosmedia.com
and be sure to check out our extended service options.
Dream, produce, market, succeed with LaRosse Media.
Serving Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Okay, we're coming to the end of our podcast, and we're going to do a quick things we like and things we hate. We haven't done that in a while. So, Scott, why don't you start us off with something that you like?
Something that I like. This is all sports related for me.
Yay.
Yeah, well, it is what it is. It's that time of year. I like that Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele signed 8-year mega extensions to stay in Winnipeg. Exact same deals, 8.5 million. When they were doing the signings, it was kind of funny because they were literally signing their contracts in front of the media, and Mark Scheifele kind of said to Kevin Cheveldayoff, who's the general manager for the Winnipeg Jets, which contract is mine? And Chevy said, it doesn't matter. They're exactly the same. So rarely do you see that in professional sports where you have like two major major athletes on the team negotiate openly with each other. They knew kind of their teams. They have different agents, but their agents were talking to each other and the team at the same time. So I thought that was really great to see. So that's something I like. And they're both playing pretty great hockey right now. I mean, it's early in the season.
Yeah. Aaron and I were talking and we were like, if we were professional hockey players, like we would never sign anywhere where it's this cold because we just had major snow. Like a couple days ago, October 23rd, first giant snowfall. Every morning I have to get my kids ready and I have to put on huge snowsuits, boots, hats. It's not even November yet. Like it is brutal. So
don't let my wife listen to this episode.
Oh man, it's Manitoba's so much worse too. At least we have Chinooks here, and it will be melted by the weekend. But it's still like if you could go to work, go to the ice like in shorts and a t-shirt and flip flops, rather than like 10 inches of snow in October. I think that I would definitely pick that. So
well, I think
they have to.
Yeah, I think that's why Pierre-Luc Dubois is down in LA and not in Montreal.
Yeah. All right. Something that I like these past couple of weeks, I actually have two things. The first is Bent Key. It's the new kids channel on Daily Wire. We downloaded it and my kids like it. There's all different types of shows. Like my kids like Peppa Pig and Paw Patrol, and there are shows that are similar to that, except I don't have to worry about like, Julius, the non-binary dog who has pink and blue nail polish and a trans flag on his collar. Like, so these are there's a good variety. They're all really good quality. And I think I've talked about this in the past that Ethan Nicole, who is formerly with the Babylon Bee, was, the main head writer. And he also worked on VeggieTales for this channel. And I've always liked him. I follow him. He's a really great guy. He wrote a book on Chesterton. So, yeah, he's great. And it's really, really, really good quality stuff. So you get like the first couple episodes free and then I think you have to pay. But I rather give my money to Bent Key than like $20 to Netflix and $15 to Disney and all the other crap that, you're bringing into your home that is confusing your kids, whether they know it or not. So that's something that I really like. And I hope that if you haven't checked it out, you will. The second thing that I personally have loved lately is I discovered this show on Netflix called Murderville. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't. It sounds like something you would like.
No, it's not how it sounds. So basically, it's Will Arnett, and he does 7 episodes. And basically, he's this kind of washed out police detective. So the whole 30 minutes is basically improv. Like he's not improvising. He has certain lines or whatever, and the characters have lines, but it's like a game of Clue. And then they bring on a new comedian each episode, and they have to solve the puzzle. So like for the first episode, it's Conan O'Brien. So he has no lines. He's just completely improvising. And Will Arnett is setting up this, there's been a murder. So Conan has to go on and they give him like, oh, put this earpiece in and go undercover here. I'll tell you what to say, like things like that. And, Conan was definitely really good. Ken Jeong was really funny. He couldn't stop laughing, which I found funny. But yeah, there's like Sharon Stone is in one of them. And the really like one of the funniest one is Marshawn Lynch. Don't ask me why don't ask me why, but it's really funny. So I would check it out. It's just like good. When I'm, I can't handle drama or like really intense things sometimes. And, this is just a really good, funny, easygoing show. So
yeah, it's nice to sometimes watch stuff like that and just, yeah, especially with our jobs, right? They can be so intense all the time, and they're not 9-to-5 jobs. So yeah, I could get that. Yeah, that's funny. That's I think I'll check that out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so something that you hate this past week.
It wasn't this past week. It was a few weeks ago. Since we're talking about Thanksgiving, I screwed up the turkey. Yeah, like this is what it is. So the past 2 years with my turkey, is about a 12-pound bird I would get, and I've always smoked it, right? Because I have a charcoal barbecue, as a lot of people who listen to this podcast know. And the last 2 years absolutely just hit it out of the park. It was so tasty, and it was the most important thing. It was moist, right? Like it wasn't like
Mhm.
dried out. And so this year I got greedy, and I was like, how can I get it so it's even smokier and even more moist? And so I got a bit of a bigger bird because my mom and sister were coming as well. And we also stuffed it for the first time this year. So we stuffed it with stuffing, and the stuffing was really, really good. But in my research, instead of doing the turkey on indirect heat, so the coal's on one side, the turkey's on the other side, and a pan below to get the drippings, which we use for the gravy, it basically just is the gravy. Um, Instead of being on the barbecue for 3.5, 4 hours at around 350, 400, in my research, I was like, okay, you're going to want to do it at around 225, 250, and about a half hour for each pound. So, kind of 7.5, 8 hours. That's what it did. And it wasn't so dry that you couldn't eat it. Like I've had turkey a lot worse than that. But I've also had turkey a lot better, including the 2 turkeys I did last year. So it's just a great reminder so that if you are doing something that works, don't fix it. Don't fix it. And I got greedy and I got prideful. And so I'm going to go back to what I did for the past 2 years. And that's just probably what I'm going to do forever going forward because it's awesome. And why change it?
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad the stuffing was good.
Yeah, everything else was pretty good. The
Mhm.
stuffing were pretty intense about. Like we actually put in the livers and the hearts and everything like that.
Yeah, my
It's
dad used to do that.
Oh yeah, it's so good. So, what about you? What do you hate?
I mean, I think it's pretty obvious given this podcast, and I was really racking my brain to try and figure out something, and then I was like, "Oh, it's staring me right in the face." And I mean, I like some of his
Me
songs,
staring you
but
in the face.
yes. How did you know?
Oh, I know
I
every
like
day.
some. And I like some of his songs, but in general, I've never been a super big fan of Justin Timberlake. And then after
Mm.
hearing that story, I despise the guy. So, and also like there's been, I think a year or two ago, there was like video of him kind of canoodling with some woman that wasn't his wife in a bar. He just seems kind of like a scuzzy guy, and I don't like him. And he coerced a woman into aborting his baby. So I hate him. So that's something that I hate.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, if you haven't liked our podcast or subscribed to us on YouTube, Rumble, Spotify, Apple, Google, make sure you do that so you know when the next episode comes out. I did again run into somebody at the True North event who listened to our podcast, so shout out to Evan. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Bye for now.